Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to our webinar, Always Up to Date on LEZ regulations for heavy vehicles via the Eco Alert Zones. My name is Caroline Bombard. I'll be your moderator today. And I'd like to introduce our two panelists, Thierry Jacou and Brittany Beagle. Before we start,
good morning, everyone.
Before we start, I'd like to go through a few housekeeping rules. So you'll be muted upon entry. This webinar is recorded and you will be receiving the slides afterwards. If you're posting on social media, you can use our hashtag GeoJunxion. And if you have any questions, then please feel free to post them in the chat box and we'll get to them in the end in the Q&A session. Please also feel free to connect with our two presenters, Thierry and Brittany, and enjoy the webinar. Over to you, Thierry.
Yeah, thank you, Caroline. Thank you. Good morning, everyone, again. We're happy that you're joining this webinar. Yeah, we're going to go through really three things. Company presentation, the description of the LEZ zones, which has been done by Brittany, and some example. And let's get into it. So a short company intro. GeoJunxion is really a new brand that we have started October last year already, and it's been really progression from what we used to be called AND, was founded in 1984, and with this really we are showing really our future, and but we build on this 25 plus years of experience with doing location content. Keeping our long-standing relationship with customers, evolving toward really high-value content, more dynamic, more really focus on promoting safety and sustainability, which the Eco zones are today. And with this, we want to create the junction between bespoke location contents and location applications and intelligence. So who are we? We are a publicly traded company, and Euronext. As such, we have a supervisory board made of several industry experts, both financial and mapping, let's say in general. Myself, history also in mapping and automotive, and the core team, which Brittany is part of, also is a mix of people being long-standing here in these companies and come from background like here, S3, and governments entities like Brittany. So, what are our capabilities? We have, engineering. Here's just a sort of a summary, highlights engineering, production, infrastructures. We do have production in India, where we've been here producing since 1999, location content. We do sourcing in-house and also quality management and quality control. Where are we? Our headquarters is in Kapel aan de IJssel in the Netherlands, which is next to Rotterdam, on the west coast, if you like, of Europe. We have location in Germany, in Italy, and in Tampa, Florida, in sales for direct contacts. And as I say, production is in India and Pune, which is sort of a West India. So what do we do? I mean, obviously the core and the backbone of everything we do and we've been historically doing is digital mapping, digital location content, and we still keep and maintain this great global content. And on top of that, we have created APIs and for planning and for location APIs. With this knowledge of creating maps and creating location content, we also offer this as a service. What is quite a unique offering to enable other customers that are all companies making maps to to research or create tailor-made content. And the recent launch, outdoor venue plan, is really creating bespoke and very tailor-made maps for outdoor venues. But today we're going to talk about really what is essential for us, safety and sustainability, and there's been a range of what we call the family, the high-level zones that foster safety and sustainability. And it starts on the left with the eco zones, which we're going to talk about today, with a second, let's say, version, which include heavy vehicles. that is already launched. It's been launching back in last year in September. It's data is available on above and beyond 100 million handsets. We launched also last year in October the health alert zones. This is all about digital health and personal health. And very soon we're going to launch the safety alert zones, which is about road safeties. So yeah, that's it really of an overview of what we do in a sort of a helicopter view. And I would like to hand over to Brittany to talk about the latest products and features of GeoJunxion, which is eco-alert zones for heavy vehicle. Good. Let me give you.
Yes.
So you should be
good. So yeah, I'm going to talk about the eco alert zones, and I'm specifically going to talk about the eco alert zones that we have for heavy vehicles. So as Jared kind of alluded to, we do have a large data set of all eco alert zones, basically worldwide coverage. But yeah, today it's specifically about the subset of for heavy vehicles. Go to the next slide.
Mm-hmm.
There we go. So just what is an eco alert zone? So an eco alert zone is either mostly we find that it's quite centered around large city centers, but it could be in other areas as well. So it's an area that either restricts access or requires a fee for vehicles to access that area. So most of these zones have been put in place by local municipalities to reduce the amount of traffic, either due to congestion and just make it more pedestrian friendly and yeah, encourage people to carpool, and as well as to reduce emissions, so the pollution in those cities or those regions. There are two main different types of zones. So there is a permanent zone. That means it's a zone that is always in effect. The restrictions don't change. And there is also a temporary zone. So these are zones that can be activated or deactivated due to certain events. So it could be there are certain zones in Italy, for instance, that have ecological Sundays. So certain Sundays of the year, they're turned on and in effect. And there are other zones that are turned on due to pollution events. So if the weather is bad or there's a particularly high pollution levels in the environment of the area, they will then turn on the zone. And we can move to the next slide.
Mm-hmm.
So this is just to give you a bit of a breakdown of the technical attributes that each zone in our database has. So what we have is we have the geometry of a zone as well as then the metadata and the attributes of a zone. So the geometry is all digitized according to high resolution imagery. We are able to also tailor make it for any map layer that you use. So if you use any vector data or any tile server, we can adjust the geometry so that it lines up perfectly to the road network that you're using in your maps or your systems. But we are finding that most of them already, because we digitize them to the high resolution imagery, that they align quite well with most maps. And then all of the metadata is encoded in UTF-8. And we have a delivery format through an API, so you're getting live changes as things are updated. So the data that you extract from the API is as up to date as we've updated it. And then the geometry we have in a GeoJSON format, and the metadata is in a JSON format. So in this table here, you can also see, so each zone has a unique ID. Then we have information about the zone, such as the name, the location, and the description of the zone, as well as the dome type. So that will say if it's a permanent zone or a temporary zone. And then some country details like the country code and what region of the country it's in. And then we go into a little bit more specific of the actual restrictions of the zone. So the activation time, so because some zones are active all of the time. Some zones might be a permanent zone, but it's only active between 8 to 5, Monday to Friday. So that will be in there, as well as the expiry time. Some zones, again, they're only active for a temporary time, or there sometimes we've seen that certain zones are only for a trial period. Then we also include the penalty, so that way you know what's the cost going to be if you drive in this zone without the right restrictions, without the proper badges. Then we have the emission standards that connect to your vehicle. And then we have the vehicle time applicability. So this really is the main restriction. So in this attribute, we have all the vehicle types that are allowed to drive or not allowed to drive in this zone, what times apply to them, and also what badges are required for those vehicles. Then we also have a last change. So what time did we change the database last for this specific zone? And then whether or not this zone is currently active. So that's kind of just a really quick breakdown of what attributes we have per zone in the database. So we can move to the next slide. So this is quite a long list of the heavy vehicle types that these zones affect. So we have up to approximately 60 vehicle types at the moment. So some of them can be quite specific and some of them are quite broad. So for instance, we've got zero emission trucks, and then we have other vehicle types for quite a lot of different standards depending on the trucks. And we also have the crit air. Those are stickers used in certain countries, not every country, sorry. And then we also have the weight of the vehicle. So it could be up to 6 tons or up to 18 tons, depending on your vehicle. So we have quite an exhaustive list of all of the vehicle types that are allowed or not allowed in these zones. And
I think just to add here, I think the point is that it's uniform about the whole platform or the whole content, right? So it's a uniform data set as well.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And this is, I know it's not very readable probably to everyone at home. This is just a quick metadata example of what the JSON format would look like with all of the data in there. So the zone name, the zone description, all of the restrictions and such like that. Well, and we can move on to the next one. So yeah, so as I mentioned before, we deliver this data as an API. We think this is the best way to deliver this type of data because it creates a centralized location for all of the information that relates to each zones. The information is updated daily, so as you take it from the API, it's the most up-to-date we can provide you. The server time from the API is almost instant. The data that comes from the API is very versatile and you can integrate it into many different platforms. And that's something that we also offer assistance on if you need help integrating into your platforms. We're happy to help with that as well. In our data set, we also show the fees and penalties in the local currency. So we find that, yeah, including the conversion rates and things like that it gets a little bit more complicated. So this way, if you're in Italy, you'll know that it's in euros. And if you're in the US, you know it's in dollars. Then we also have a text. So all of the text that we have for each zone is in English first, and then also in the local language. So for Italy, we have it in English and then Italian. For Belgium, for instance, we have it in English, we have it in Dutch and in French. And then we also have, for the future, we have a bit of a roadmap that we have planned to add more features and more attributes to the data. A few things we have on the plan is to include locations of where you can find the stickers or the badges that are required. Where do you purchase those? And also something simple like the images of the road signs. So if you're in a new country that you're not familiar with, you can at least know what signs to be looking for. And to next slide. Yes, so this is the current coverage we have today in our data set. So we have a total of 627 zones that are specifically for heavy vehicles. And then you can go down through the list and see what countries we have in our data set. Just something to mention, that if a country is not on our list, it's because there is no current active zone in that country. We do have a list of future zones that are to be added to the database, but we add them as they become active, about a month or two ahead of time, and then we add them into the database. So this number, our total number of zones, is constantly dynamic and it's constantly changing depending on when zones are added and not added. So that's part of our daily update procedure, is we add zones when they're created, as well as we're constantly in contact with local municipalities and news to see what other countries and what other cities are planning on implementing these types of zones. And yeah. And just to give you guys an idea, we do have, this is a subset of a bigger data set. So we do have the heavy vehicle zones. We also have passenger car zones, and that one we have a total of 812. And again, that's the same worldwide coverage. And then we also have limited traffic zones. So these are a little bit different. These are specifically to reduce traffic in certain areas, and these do not have anything to do with basically any pollution alerts or eco restrictions. So at the moment we have zones for Spain and Italy, and we are working to add to that database. I think Germany and Netherlands are soon to come into the database.
And happy to hear feedback and wishes as well that could influence our roadmap.
Yeah, as I mentioned, we are planning different features for the future. And if there's something that you think that, hey, we should have this in our data set, we're happy to have feedback and implement something else as well.
Thank you. So let's go for an example.
Yeah, so here I just have a few examples. I think I've got 3 zones here, just to give you guys all an idea of what the geometry looks like and a little bit of what you can expect from the attributes. So this is a zone here in Barcelona. So you can see there's also some roads cut out. So the ring road kind of around Barcelona is not included in the zone. So that's what we go through and digitize and really make sure that the roads that apply to the zone are either inside the geometry, or roads that are excluded from the zone are outside of the zone. So that's where the digitization and the high resolution satellite imagery really helps us determine these things. We get all of our sources from local authorities. So this is the actual information as implemented by the authorities in Barcelona. And the restrictions for this zone are actually Monday to Friday from 7 to 8. But again, that is different in all different zones, is depending on the restrictions and the stickers requirements, which is why we think that this is such a necessary thing to know, is that all of these areas, nothing is standardized, everything is very different. Yes, we can go
to the next one.
Next one, yeah. So this is an environmental zone in Germany. I do also know that this zone has restrictions for passenger vehicles as well. So this zone would be in both of our data sets as a passenger vehicle zone as well as a heavy vehicle zone. So this one has restrictions for the heavy vehicles. It includes buses as well. And Germany, for instance, has green stickers. So vehicles and buses with a green sticker are allowed in this environmental zone. So in that case, depending on how the zone is structured, in our restrictions, it will say, if you have this sticker, you can enter, or it will be, you cannot enter if you have this sticker. So it really depends on the restrictions and what the local authorities have implemented for the zone. So, and also you can see this zone doesn't just cover the city center. It is quite a larger region outside of the city center as well. So we are finding that not all zones are just the city center. They are trying to expand them out so that there's less less emissions going into the city center to make the pollution levels lower for the people that live there. And yeah, we can move on to the next one.
Mm-hmm. Bologna.
Yes, so this one you can see is quite complex. There's quite some roads that are not included in the zone as well. So this one is actually one of those temporary zones. So this is one, it will turn on or off depending on pollution alerts in that zone, in that area. And that is decided by the authorities. So for this one, heavy vehicles with Euro 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4 are not allowed to drive Monday to Friday if there is a pollution peak. So a zone like this is really important to be aware of if you're driving a heavy vehicle, because this zone will be active or not active. So you'll need to know that you can't go into this area if there is a pollution peak. And so can go to the next slide. I have just a kind of a zoomed in of this zone.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So this just shows a little bit more the accuracy of the road digitization that we've done, whether an area is inside or outside. And so the roads that are not covered in yellow are not included in this zone. So that's basically meaning that if you're driving on these roads, you'll need to know if you want to exit off, if you're in a heavy vehicle and there is a pollution peak, you need to have the right, either the right sticker or you just cannot enter that area. So in Italy, they also have an instance with their pollution peaks that if it's been the same pollution level for 3 consecutive days, they will actually then scale up the restrictions. And the restrictions can be anywhere from just you cannot enter, or then the speed limit is decreased. So all of these things, different speed limits, different times, different badges, those things can change and are dynamic with the temporary zones. So that's why it's great that we provide daily updates for this data so that things like that can be in real time. You can see whether or not you can drive there with your heavy vehicle.
Very good. Yeah, we see how accuracy is important here, right? And the matching was the actual road, right? Good. Well, thank you. I think a really good example, Brittany. I think that gives a bit of a insight into the zones. I think obviously, as always, you have to work with it. So yes, in summary, it's all what we're offering here is aggregate information of a registered any sort of legal restriction for heavy vehicles. We, as Brittany says, has been created with the local government, so that's authoritative, and we're checking this really on a daily basis, including weekends, by the way. We do offer today world coverage. It's expanding. As also we see this restriction expanding greatly lately. I mean, COVID also is one of the factors, but we see that as more and more countries are pushing on pollution and trying to get cities cleaner, that this is expanding very fast. And we started a year ago, I think, and it's amazing how much more zones we have since a year. So key features is a very accurate geometry. The time, as Brittany explained, when it's applicable, always available in English and local language, which make things for global navigation and transport logistics system quite easy. You will have fees and penalties in local currency, and what is very important is, as Brittany mentioned, it is map agnostic, so that could be easily used and matched and mingled with whatever map solution you have. And again, if you require an increased accuracy or a very specific, we are open to to adapt those zones and to make sure they're tailored to your favorite mapping system. Typical use case here was multiple and plenty, but I think navigation route planning is the most evident one. But also we see this more and more interest in travel advisor website and other applications around information about travel. I think especially countries like Italy that we know after the COVID time, essentially it's a very touristic areas of France as well. That it's nowadays really almost impossible to be aware of as a tourist. So what are the zones and the limitations? Would you have this on your handset or wherever? That would be quite a very useful knowledge base, and this is where our data is made for. Yeah, so pretty much in time. Very good. Let's go to the Q&A. Caroline, do we have a couple of questions?
Yes, we do. Thank you, Brittany. Thank you, Thierry, for a very comprehensive presentation. The first question I have in the chat box is your data set geo-referenced?
I think
yes.
Brittany will be the best to answer, I guess.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
So all of the imagery is in WGS84, and the map is able, the geometry is geo-referenced so that you can open it and it will be referenced onto a map.
Okay, thank you. And on to the, thank you. Next question. Brittany, you mentioned that your maps, the data set or the zones are actually daily updated on a daily basis, but really they never change. So why is there a need to update them so frequently?
They actually do change quite often. So as I mentioned, the temporary zones actually do need to be monitored on a daily basis because they can turn on a moment's notice, as well as sometimes, as I mentioned with Italy, if the pollution event is still going on, the zone will actually then even have higher restrictions. We also have noticed, so we've had this data set for about a year now and have been starting our monitoring process and tweaking it as the year goes on. And we've noticed that a lot of the permanent zones also do change over time. So it could be that the restrictions change depending on what the municipality is finding in the area, as well as sometimes the geometry expands or decreases slightly. So things like that we include in our daily checks and make sure that we are providing the most accurate and up-to-date information.
Yeah, just to add to this, I think based on really our historical information, we see that really daily updates as really the only meaningful way of dealing with this data. Otherwise, if you have every quarter, it's going to be a lot of outdated data. So we do believe that's the way forward, and that's why we also have a service level agreement on this one. We're coming to have anything changed within 48 hours in the database.
That actually dovetails quite nicely into my next questions. Yeah. What if I notice that something is missing in the database? How fast, can you integrate it into your data set?
I think this one's for you, Brittany.
Sure.
Yeah.
As soon as we notice that a zone is missing, we quickly locate the correct sources to make sure that we can find the most accurate and definite geometry of the zone, as well as the restrictions. And then we digitize the zone with the satellite geometry or satellite imagery, and as well attribute the zone. And that process can take less than 24 hours. So we really try our best not to have anything missing. But yeah, as we've mentioned, it's still a new and dynamic data set. So if anyone has feedback and you notice something is slightly off, we're happy to discuss it and find the right solution for that.
Okay, I think another question for Brittany is, I own a fleet of industrial trucks. Can you guarantee full coverage in Italy?
Yes, so if you look at our vehicle types, it covers all vehicles. So if you're looking for industrial trucks, heavy vehicles, or small cars, we have a vehicle type for that. And if you're unsure, we can always provide you with our list of vehicles that the types that we have in our database, and you can cross-reference that with the vehicles that you have, and that's something we can help you with, and you can see if our database works for you.
And I think it was also referred to full coverage, and I think this is our we strive really to full coverage, and our intention to have full coverage. So yes, I mean, obviously we do our best. I mean, guarantee is a hard word, but we guarantee that we have done our best to have full coverage. And as Brittany says, within 24 hours we can add a missing one, should there be any. But we do a lot of check and counterbalance and cross checks to make sure that that we have all the zones in there. Because it's one of the prerequisites where you want to have all the information. Yeah.
Okay. The last question I have, I think that would be more directed to you, Thierry. What is the price model for this data set?
Yeah, thank you. Good question. I was about to ask, when do I get a question? Good. I think, commercially we have different business models pretty much aligned to the use case. Most likely we see a request now for asset management, asset tracking. As a result, obviously, we have a license per asset. We also have, from some that has GIS platforms, we also have a license for GIS. So the whole point is here is we really want to be adaptive to what the requirement is, and to find the best solution for the individual customers. But as an experience, we're pretty competitive. So it's a bit so maybe a rough answer, but I think the best really here is to talk to our sales team. I'm just sharing here Ian Spicht, who is head of sales for let's say global sales, and your local representative obviously is also the right partner to go to. But we really like to talk and to see what is your need and to find the best possible solution. Okay. Hope that answered the question without saying any numbers, but I think that also answered the questions.
I think it did. I don't see any more questions in the chat box. So without further ado, I'd like to thank everyone for attending. Thank our two presenters, Thierry and Brittany, and look forward to seeing you on our next webinar.
Thank you. We'll make it on time. Okay. Thank you, everyone, and thank you for attending, and see you soon, I hope. Thank you. Bye-bye.